the Innovation Podcast with Mark Reed Edwards and Garnett Harriman. Let's start the show.
Hey, Garnett, how you doing?
Great. How you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Hey, we're continuing our chat about experiential marketing with James Kern and Chris Clegg. What are we getting into this time?
We're getting into some of the nitty-gritty around technology options and the primacy of data, AR, VR, benchmarking, data for forecasting outputs and engagement levels, that sort of stuff. Just kind of a big thing. I was reading recently in Ad Age that there is a strange sort of inverse or even boomerang effect going on, that a lot of large brands with a lot of money to spend on things like experiential are actually de-emphasizing the over-reliance on digital marketing. And, this comes in the face of like Europe's GDPR and the Facebook, Instagram, YouTube backlash about people's data getting appropriated and monetized, all that larger context. And it's sort of an organic shift back towards real-time face-to-face events, which are becoming a fairly essential part of holistic marketing strategies. I think we're going to get a lot of detail around that and flavor from these two experts in the field.
All right, let's get to it. So in the past, brand experiences were mainly in the physical realm, and now with AR and VR, and insert the buzzword you want there, things are changing. So how is the future going to look there?
Well, James, that's your world. I would love to see the future and see where we're going to be. I mean, I'll be the first in line to get plugged in, but James, you probably have more opinion on that than I do.
Oh, it's crystal balls, right? If we could all have one that was accurate, it'd be wonderful to tell. But I think, what we're seeing with, these immersive and exponential technologies that are around us, artificial intelligence and voice command, right? We're starting to lose the need for physical interfaces. And I think that, when we look at the future of what potential augmented reality looks like, I think we're going to start having things where we're built into our, daily glasses that we wear on our eyes for either sunglasses or for vision correction. We're going to have these, enabled devices that are completely embedded in other things that are kind of core to our basic function and lifestyle. And it becomes more frictionless the way that we interact with these technologies. And what that does is it gives brands and other types of information delivery systems this ubiquitous access, this omnipresence in our lives that ideally the context and the timing is perfect for us, and that creates even better value to the user to have access to whatever these messages or opportunities or promotions are, or right information at the right time. And I think, that's where we're heading. And I think we're starting to see some of it even now with the major players in voice recognition and these connected home devices where you can talk to them and control your television and control your ice maker and your refrigerator and all these sort of things. I think we're going to start seeing that becoming smaller and more prevalent in a lot of different places in our world.
Yeah, it gets to that idea of reach too that you were talking about earlier, because digital as it stands today, independent of those things, it's very flat and cold and two-dimensional. And experiential is visceral. It's getting all those senses engaged. And when you start bringing that VR into the mix, you're starting to let the web and let the internet be the catalyst for more senses to be engaged and to be more visceral and immersive experience, which I think is going to ultimately lead to greater reach. More marketers are going to be able to get the benefits of experiential to more people more efficiently, and those are going to start to become exciting options for brands.
Garnett, what do you think? One of the businesses you have is an apparel business. How about AR and VR in that business?
I want to make a quick end cap to both James's comment and Chris's comment. I think the dichotomy about physical in the past and now virtual or augmented or extended reality in the current and the future, that dichotomy is breaking down. I think Chris kind of hit it on the head with the word visceral. And then I'm also thinking of certain experiences James and I have had, like looking at new technologies together on the West Coast. And a funny sort of side story comes to mind wherein James and I were had donned the iconic headsets for this particular technology, and we were deep into the virtual world, and we were playing a very, very physical experience, and my back went out.
Oh, no.
Talk about a physical experience.
So I'm assuming James won.
James was such a gentleman about it. He went on to win the game, I think.
Good.
And then came back to see if I needed a stretcher. So, the visceral part that Chris was talking about, that's no joke. I mean, the whole point of immersion is to be able to activate all your senses, as Chris was saying, and to be I would say transporting, right? I mean, literally transporting away from the physical reality that you're in and into this reality that features some compelling aspect of the brand story or the brand experience that is sponsoring the game or the puzzle room or whatever it is that you're going through. This whole notion of physical in the past and like virtual in the future, I think that dichotomy is like definitely sort of withering away very quickly. To get back to the question that you posed about the apparel industry, this is a really interesting thing. One of my side projects is about working with a famous and fancy producer who is the head of New York Fashion Week. And as you mentioned, I on a much smaller scale, I own an apparel company. What we're seeing there is like complete and utter disruption on a large scale. Things like, being able to experience through AR and the information download systems that James was referring to earlier, being able to experience the entire supply chain about a garment in real time at a fashion show. And so, you can do a deep dive or whatever level of dive that you want to do immediately in the moment.
Right.
Through the different AR apps, being able to then switch directly from that supply chain perspective, an informational perspective to more of like a purchasing scenario or an ordering scenario at the very least. And then, therefore compressing that time between the quote fashion show, the invoicing, the delivery, all of that stuff can happen quite literally in the blink of an eye. And that is sort of the future at a very high level of the apparel industry. And the challenge is basically finding, because there are multiple solutions to do these, what's known as see now, buy now. The real challenge is that basically a lot of these solutions have been promoted at the brand level and not necessarily at the industry level. And that also is starting to change. I noticed at the last New York Fashion Week extravaganza I was at that none other than SAP was tooling around trying to recruit brands and fashion show producers to their so-called fashion platform. So that's probably a little hint as to where the future is headed.
Does that mean it's jumped the shark maybe already if SAP is involved?
It's gonna be interesting, right? Because the things you can do with an integration into that SAP type ecosystem are pretty amazing. From a data collection, data analysis, data implementation standpoint, and then all of the different CRM integrations that exist with SAP and within that ecosystem are also pretty compelling. And just the sheer amount of money that SAP can bring to the table to help galvanize like an industry-wide, leading solution, right?
Yeah.
Pretty compelling.
So with these brand experiences omnipresent in our lives, what's the risk of overexposure and fatigue? James, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think you're hitting on an interesting point, and it's. I think what we start to see, and I think there's some academic research and study on this stuff about people's attention span and mind share, and I think there's lots of increase in ADHD and different things for a variety of reasons. But I think part of it is just the amount of exposure to messaging that we're getting. And, I've seen some statistics that talk about, 20, 30, 40,000 exposures in a day if you're out in a big city environment. And, 95% of those things are going unnoticed by the person who's being presented with those.
Yeah, that's the key.
Right. It's cutting through the noise. Yeah. Yeah.
It's that key is that we filter that stuff out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think a brand needs to worry about overexposure so long as it is going to be riveted, targeted on who it's talking to, and it's going to be relevant for that person. Because we're really good at ignoring the irrelevant information. It goes to that story that says, the furniture catalog that you get printed in the mail is a disaster for the environment, and it's junk mail, and you despise the producer of it. Unless you're looking for a couch. If you're in the market for a couch, that's the most valuable piece of mail you could have gotten in the box that day. And so that the importance and even the responsibility that marketers have to find those consumers and target them respectfully is makes that difference. And when the brands don't care, and you've got the car commercials and you've got the insurance companies and you've got the same industries just blasting us with advertising, we block that out across the board. But when the brands are targeting and when they're using the right data metrics, the right consumer targeting and messaging, then they're going to be relevant. And that's where I think the brands can deal with the issues or the risks of overexposure.
So what I hear is personalization is the antidote to overexposure.
For sure.
Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, relevance. Yeah. I mean, personalization, certainly. And then relevance. Like, we need to, there is certain information that I want to see right now. And the retargeting that I get online is very helpful. And there's certain information I no longer care about. And the retargeting is annoying. And so the personal is almost table stakes. It's got to be relevant now. It's beyond that. Know who I am. It's now know what I want this moment instead of getting in my way with what I wanted yesterday.
It's the difference between knowing your first name and knowing what you want and what's relevant to your life.
Yeah.
And the right information at the right time, I think is a big part of it. Right. And so it's having that mechanism. And you look at, there's some innovators in sort of the digital marketing space, and some of the big clients that I have the pleasure of getting to bring to the stage and help them tell their story. They're invested heavily in the analytics and the metrics to understand what's been happening, and then the system of delivery to get the right message at the right moment to that individual, and closing down the time frame it takes for them to read who that is that's interacting with them, and then find that right piece of content to serve them right away.
Totally.
That's a huge part of the bleeding edge in these sort of marketing technology ecosystems right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So who's pointing the way to the future? What are some real world brand experiences that are futuristic already or will be soon?
Oh, I mean, if you just pick up on what we were talking about just now, the right information at the right time and how fast you can deliver that. And I think there's a few different technology ecosystems that are primarily in the digital space, because that's where this networked, connected, always gathering information and always able to deliver information is probably the strongest right now in our society and technology ecosystems. So I think in digital, there's a lot of current capability in that way. And in fact, they talk about it in milliseconds, like literally from the time that a user is doing some behavior on a commercial website, the small number of milliseconds it takes for the algorithm to read what should be the next piece that we serve them based on what we're reading from them right now. And so that's pretty impressive. And then when you take it into the physical realm, I think what we're seeing a lot now is this what you guys were talking about earlier, the combination of physical and digital. And as Garnett was mentioning, this boundary between physical and digital dissolving more rapidly. And I think you see that with gesture-based interfaces, and you see that with, projection mapped large scale installations where people are standing completely immersed in a visual landscape that's being created by video projection, but it's so massive scale that they're getting immersed in that. And then there's the augmented reality layers where now we're being able to reach into the space in front of our device and control graphics and things where they don't actually physically exist, but on my screen, I can see my hand and I can see the button that's not in space back there. And when I hit that artificial button, it makes something happen. And so now you're really seeing the interface disappear or become integrated into basic human functionality, and devices start to become less important.
Yeah.
So I think there's all kinds of interesting things happening.
There's a weird barrier though that I think we have to get over, and it's the ick factor that people don't. The coolness and the amazingness of the new experience is what draws us to it, but the things that make that commercially viable scare us away. It's like the idea that we can make meat in a laboratory that's very environmentally responsible, but nobody wants to eat it because it's just gross to think of meat grown in a laboratory. And it's the same thing with data. I think Facebook and I think Google did a terrible job explaining to people over the last 10 years why they can provide these awesome services for free. And I think they took advantage of the idea that there's enormous value behind the scenes and being able to operationalize the activity and learn from it and use it as marketing collateral. And we're now at this place where the general public is starting to understand and appreciate the level to which we have this information and what can be done with it. And it's icky, it's scary. We don't know how to respond to it. It doesn't feel right. And that is inhibiting innovation. It's inhibiting our ability to kind of monetize these things in a way that's going to make the folks that have the skills and talent really come to market with amazing solutions. And we got to figure that out. And I think we're too far in one direction with the data right now. We need to draw that back and be more transparent. But at the same time, there's a lot of amazing things that are happening in the laboratories from a technology perspective that are looking for that avenue into the general market. And we haven't found it yet.
Well, I'd like to I'd like to pick up the thread on data a little bit. I think that there's we talked about physical to virtual. We talked about physical, digital. We talked about technologies. We talked about basically the arc of technology application from gimmicks essentially to more strategic. And throughout all of this was this sort of, embedded in the experiences and behind the scenes. And then Chris picked up on data. I think that there's a real significant risk of backlash about how data is treated, how it's collected, how it's treated, how much lack of transparency there is currently. I think there's a real danger of backlash kind of getting in the way of breakthrough experiences going forward. On the one hand, we're all sitting here talking about, this sort of Shangri-La future of brand experiences. On the other hand, personally in my daily life, I opt out of a lot of brand experiences.
Sure.
And
I think we all do, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. My end cap would be basically, figuring out better, more transparent. I have another method of looking at it, which is also more transactional. If you really want to know me and you really want my data, let's make a deal.
Sure.
And I think maybe 5G will support, platforms and applications that end up making, that data exchange more transparent and I would argue more transactional.
Or it could result in innovative ways of getting your data without you knowing it too. So there's that side of it as well.
That would be kicking the can down the road.
I think that's going to get solved with focus. And I think the thing that's happening on the macro level is the same thing that happens on the micro level, where somebody says, I know I need data. I know when this is done, I'm going to have to report back on something, but I have no clue what I'm going to report on or what data I need. So let me collect everything I can think of. And when I get to my deadline, I'll figure out what to do with that in order to put a report together. It's going to be smart. And so there becomes this anxiety around needing to capture everything that's possible. And you replace that with focus. You replace that with meaningful purpose that adds value to folks on both sides of the equation. And when you have that direction and you have that understanding of, hey, I'm gathering this data because I'm going to use it for this and it's going to make this better, then that starts to make sense. And the folks that are going to benefit from the better are happy to offer it. And the folks that are collecting it are going to save money and have more sanity in the process. So it comes from focus. And there's some areas and some niches have a lot of that and others don't right now. And we spend a lot of time working with our clients trying to help them develop that and then look to see either what aspects of their tools have what they need and what can they let go of and what aspects don't and what do you need to add.
And a quick comment on that piece. So Chris is talking about a huge value add that his services company lends into the mix. And it may or may not, in any given engagement, it may or may not be technologized, the delivery of the service. What I'm waiting for, and I've spent a lot of time talking to James about this, whether it's out there. If not, should we build it or should we buy it? And so what I keep thinking about is where's the tech, or whether it's a platform or an app, or where basically we are delivering some of that brilliance that Chris gives to his customers about what data you need directly back into the feedback loop to make their data collection that happens in their engagements and activate, make that smarter.
Sure.
Make it more self-serve, make it more dashboard oriented. James and I spent a lot of time talking about that, where to get it, whether to build it or buy it.
Right. I mean, I think that points to there is some hunger in the market from the people who are making these investments in marketing programs to have better insight and better information. And I think the other side, this value exchange that we talk about, and how so many of us opt out of the brand experiences because of the tracking and the data and that sort of thing. And my day job is to create these experiences, and I probably opt out to more than most. I generally opt in when I just want to understand what people are doing out there, and oftentimes halfway through the experience, I'm like, it's the same old thing, and I don't really understand the relevance and what is the value to me, and so I end up opting out midstream, and it just reinforces that when you're starting with a design of an experience for a brand, being hyper conscientious about the value exchange, and if the brand is trying to collect some data and some insight, what value are you providing that consumer or end user that compels them to want to trade that information? And it generally has to be a pretty valuable offer for people to really stay engaged and want to do that.
Yeah, it has to be a service like Facebook or like Gmail, or it has to be something that makes our life better. It's from the buyers of marketing and the folks that are hiring us to put together these programs. We've found that really they want insight. They want to be able to get insight from the data, and that's not static. It's very subjective to who the stakeholder is, and anybody will find data insightful if it helps them make better decisions. And so, in order to figure out what should be collected and how to collect it, you got to go to that very beginning, and you got to say, who are these stakeholders? What kind of decisions do they need to make day to day? What information is going to help them make those better decisions, and where does that information exist? And if you don't start there, then you're going to be in this frantic, anxiety-prone kind of place of getting everything you can imagine. But if you do start there, you know exactly what you need to collect and why, and you have that sense of purpose that brings sanity to the possibilities and all the chaos.
So it's about relevance on both sides of the ledger, right?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really want to thank James and Chris for being here. Such a great discussion. We did 2 episodes on it. And I think your dog really liked it too, Garnett.
Yeah, that's definitely him in the background.
So what do we have to look forward to next time?
We have a real treat, and a woman whose career cuts across a lot of big themes happening in the world right now, business themes. Her name is Geraldine Gregg, and she's the CEO and founder of Anytownusa.com, which is essentially an e-commerce clearinghouse, a portal for products made in the USA. What an interesting concept in the age of Chinese manufacturing. So that's really cool. But really, the backstory on Geraldine has a lot to do with her bursting through the glass ceiling in a lot of ways in other parts of her career. She's a member of the board of directors of both Hanes, publicly traded company, and Welch's, a publicly traded company. So she's seen it all, done it all, and she's got a lot to say about things. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like a great episode. Really looking forward to that. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining Garnett and Mark on the Innovation Podcast. Visit innovationpodcast.co to subscribe and listen to other episodes.